So if you do all of that I mentioned in this video, there's no way you're gonna fail the exam. Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing well. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can pass CKAD exam, Certified Kubernetes Application Developer exam. This exam is unlike other exams. You'll have to perform certain tasks on a terminal window to verify your skills. It's like other exams, you would have a multiple choice questions and you just pick the right one. You can remember certain things, but when you're gonna prepare for this exam, prepare to learn things by doing. I would suggest give yourself at least a month if you don't know anything about Kubernetes. A month is a decent amount of time to learn about some of the concepts and practice with those concepts and then just appear in an exam. This video is split into like different sections. The first section is going to be talking about how you're going to prepare for it, and the second is like some of the tips and tricks that you would need to appear in an exam, and then how you're going to do the exam itself. So let's get started. The first part I would suggest is the documentation. If you don't know anything about Kubernetes, that's the good place to start with. Start with the getting started section in Kubernetes documentation. Set up a mini kube or a single node cluster on your machine. Learn the basic concepts in the concept overview. Get yourself familiarized with some of the main components like pod, deployment, services, what those are in Kubernetes world. And it's a good place to start some sort of a basic tutorials, and documentation has this tutorial section. I would definitely recommend you to kind of at early stages do the basic tutorials, get your hands dirty, get yourself familiarized with how the certain concepts work and how you deploy basic objects. Just do the basics yet, and there is a tool called ChatGPT out there, so I would definitely recommend you to use ChatGPT to clarify some of the concepts or things you're confused at. With ChatGPT, we all know you can ask some sort of a silly question like hey, I don't understand, explain me like I'm just 5 years old, or I just don't understand, clarify. You can keep asking the questions to ChatGPT until you have clarification on certain concepts that you're learning. So now you familiarize yourself with the basic concept, what the pod, deployment, services, ingress, and things like that are. So now you can kind of maybe buy a course or that will prepare you for the exam. So the one that I recommend is by Mumshad Ahmad, something like that. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. It's available on Udemy. You could also, I think they have a website called Cloud. You go to the website, sign up for a month or so, do the course, and they have a labs available and everything like that. I got it on Udemy. I recommend you to do that. Don't buy the expensive version. There's always some sort of a sales going on if you're watching the video when it's released around Christmas time. So it's very likely they'll have some sort of a discount for holiday season. So benefit from that, and you'll be able to buy the course for like maybe $20 or something. Just wait for a couple of weeks if it's not on the discount, and then just learn things as the things are taught in the course. You must do the labs. If you don't do the labs, you may not grasp some of the concepts, you may not understand how things work. So I definitely recommend you to do the labs. So as you are doing labs and learning things from this Udemy course by Mumshad, I would definitely recommend you to kind of constantly go back to the documentation section, if you need to clarify certain things, or you want to get more information about things that are being taught by him. So I definitely recommend you to go back to documentation to clarify things. So maybe skip certain sections, if you already know about them, there's no shame in that. You don't have to do all the sections. So whatever you're familiarized with, you already know, I would maybe just worth skipping it. Why waste the time about things that you already know? When you're doing the course, after you complete the course, do all the labs, constantly referring to the documentation. Once you're done with it, don't do the exam practice yet. Like, the practice exams available. There's a lightning labs too. Don't do that yet. We're gonna do that after the next step. So after you completed the course, get your familiarize yourself with the documentation, learn about Vim. So Vim is gonna be your best friend when it comes to editing your manifest files when you're appearing in an exam. So if you're not good with Vim, you may struggle. You may end up wasting a lot of times doing a single question. So if you get familiar yourself with the Vim, it'd be easier for you to kind of navigate with those YAML files that'll appear in the exam, or that you may have to construct. Easier get yourself familiarized with how you can find certain text, search it, replace it. How you can select a section of the code and kind of move it to left or right or wherever you need to, so that is kind of syntax properly. So definitely recommend that. Get your Vim basics sorted out. If you already know it, don't worry about it, but it's a good idea to kind of refresh those concepts. So now I want you to go back to the documentation. So the tasks there's a task session within the documentation that typically would have different sort of a task, how do you configure pod and limit the resources for a pod. So do if you're not whatever the topics were covered in the course, do that tasks related to those sections that were taught in the course, because the course is designed for CKAD. So whatever things that were taught in the course, do related tasks in the documentation. Those are extensive tasks. They're gonna explain how you define environment, how do you use environment variable with the pod. There's a task available how do you limit memory and even CPU. So I would definitely recommend you to do those tasks, get your understanding solid here, perform those tasks. And if you set it up, play a mini some sort of a mini what's it called, mini cluster, or you have a node set it up on your machine, you can perform all these tasks on your machine and maybe just kind of clean it up once you're done. But if you don't feel like doing that, there is a website called Killer SH. So this essentially they give you a node to work on, multi-node cluster to work on it to perform certain tasks, so that the different tasks may require you to have multiple nodes. So you can use the playground from killer.sh, and there's also a playground node available from Kubernetes as well. You could utilize that. So do majority of the tasks that are available in the documentation. I would also recommend you to kind of perform some of the non-basic tutorials. Now early on you did the basic tutorials, now do the other tutorials. You'll get familiarized with yourself with how you deploy an app, how do you create replicas, how do you make your app highly available and things like that. So once you do those tutorials, you'll have a really good understanding how the different Kubernetes objects work. So now you have that solid understanding. Now I want you to get familiarized yourself with the declarative commands, how you can create pods using kubectl, how you could even create deployments using kubectl. Kubectl create deployment. You could also create services Kubernetes expose particular pods or even deployments. So get yourself familiarized with those declarative commands. They'll help you magnificently when you appearing in an exam, rather than just kind of preparing manifest files starting from the scratch, declaring all the values. It's a good idea to generate the manifest using those declarative commands. Also utilize the dry run and YAML output, and then just kind of output that YAML output into a manifest file, and then work on that and just kind of configure your objects as you need to. now you have a decent knowledge about Vim, or refresh your knowledge about Vim, and you know how declarative commands work. I want you to come back to the Code Cloud, or like, you know, the course by CKAD, and do the labs. You know, this time don't, you know, edit manifest files, just perform the task using declarative commands. You know, you'll notice how quickly you'll be able to perform those tasks in the lab. And like, now is the time for you to do the practice exams on this on the course. So do the practice exam, and make sure to do the lightning labs that are available. The labs are somewhat challenging, and they have the questions like, you know, how you're gonna, kind of questions that you're gonna get in the exam. So you make sure you do those labs. And if you don't get the questions right, revisit the documentation or some of the sections wherever those concepts were taught, learn them, get the understanding, and do the labs again. You know, the questions in the lightning labs are the one, or kind of like the ones that gonna appear in the exam. So, you know, the practice exams questions are okayish, like, you know, you probably, like, some of the questions may appear in an exam, something like that, but the lightning lab questions will definitely appear in an exam. So you make sure that, if you know, you do the questions right in the lightning labs. So there's a practice questions available from this guy Dimitris. Like, you know, he has a repository available. I'll leave the link below in the description for you guys to check it out, and they're like a decent practice question for you to practice. And you know, you should be doing all things declarative now, like, you know, for the most part. Like, you know, there will be scenarios where you have to create manifest files from scratch, and that's okay. And even if you're creating those manifest files, you know, you spend quite a bit of time on documentation already. So, you know, copy some of the and you know, the templates are like, this is how you create a pod, how you create an environment code, and bring it into your terminal, right? So, you know, you already know how to create certain things, so why just kind of reinvent the wheel? So just copy that code that's on the documentation and put it into your terminal. So now it's the time for you to kind of buy an exam. So before you book an exam, I would definitely recommend you to kind of subscribe to this channel, like Code, I think it's called Cube Astronaut. Or so essentially, I think this is a group where, for people like, you know, who have completed all Kubernetes related certification. So in that group, there's always some sort of a, you know, offering that will help you book an exam at discounted price, sometimes 40%, even 50%. Again, if you're watching the video around the time it's been published, it's very likely that there will be some sort of a promo going on where you'll get that discount for like 40, even 50% when you book an exam. So, you know, saving 50%, $150, it's pretty decent. If you can't find any some sort of a decent promo, when you bought a code with on Udemy, there is a 30% discount comes with that. There's a code available. You could use that code and book your exam, which would be 30% off. But again, I would recommend you to check other groups, so you know you can get a decent value. So when you book an exam, it comes with the 2 practice sessions. So this is something you gotta remember. So there are 2 sessions available for you to practice questions on Killer SH. So the questions on both sessions are the same. So I just activate the first session. Do the questions. You shouldn't be able to do all the questions on time. Those are like kind of relatively complex questions, and they consume tons of time. And you know, while you're doing that, again, use the declarative commands, visit the documentation. I think if I haven't mentioned the document, you'll be able to access documentation while you're doing the exam. So you know, the more you know about the documentation, where the certain things are, easier for you to kind of find them when you're doing the exam. So again, talking about the sessions, so activate the first session, do the questions, you know, check out the answers, you know, even look into the details of the answers, like, you know, how the task would be performed by, you know, different engineers, like, you know, how quickly they could have been performed versus how you've done it. So once you have fully completed the session 1 and completed all the questions on this different lab environment, lightning labs, or even from the Dimitris repo on GitHub, you should be pretty ready for exam. If you're struggling with the practice question, like our practice questions or a practice exam that you got it with the exam, I would, if you're getting like 80% or 80 or 90 score, I would say you're okay to appear in exam. But if you're scoring like 20, 30 or maybe 40, I would highly recommend you to kind of revisit the concept that you are struggling with. So there are some of the tips I want to share when you're in the exam. So when you're in the exam, you'll be working on a different machines for each sort of a question. So when you switch into different machines, you should be able to use aliases, like instead of typing the kubectl, you'll be able to type K, and you'll be working on different namespaces. So rather than just defining kubectl get deploy and at the last you type namespace, whatever the namespace you're working in, always start with the K and then ns for the namespace and define the namespace, and then just let the auto completion work in the terminal, and it will get the commands for you for get deployments, or even you describing certain parts. So but my point is that describe the namespace before you even trying to get any when you try to get the object. So define the namespace before rather than doing it at the end, and use the auto completion. As I mentioned before, copy and pasting would be allowed within this particular terminal you'll be available for the exam. So again, familiarize yourself with the documentation, do things on the documentation, do the task, do the tutorials that are available in documentation. So the last thing, the questions that you're definitely going to get in an exam is that related to deployments, how you do canary deployment, and how you create services and how you expose certain services. There's definitely going to be a question about readiness probes or liveness probe or something related to probes. So get yourself familiar with the probes, prepare for that. You're definitely going to get a question about network policies and configuration with the parts, which is kind of working with environment, secrets, and config map. There's going to be question about Docker as well. So how do you create an image, how do you run a container after creating the image, and how you push it to the repository. So before you appear in an exam, it's a good idea to kind of revisit your Docker concepts. There's going to be question about Helm. I think the course does cover Helm, so do the practice questions. The killer SH, like the practice exam you're gonna get with the exam voucher, it has question related to Helm, so do those questions. So if you do all of that I mentioned in this video, there's no way you're gonna fail the exam. If you do your concepts right, learn things from the documentation, practice those things that you're learning, you're definitely gonna pass the exam. And with that, that's it for the video. That's all I wanted to cover, how you prepare for it, how you book an exam. When you come to start booking an exam, you just go to the Linux Foundation website, and you'll be able to book the exam there. So sorry if I didn't cover that, and if I missed anything, leave a comment below. There are like a lot of places where you can check out the questions too. There are like tons of places people have prepared the questions, but you're not gonna get the straightforward questions in the exam, to be honest with you. Nobody's gonna tell you, hey, create a pod, and that's gonna be a question. The question is gonna be like, how do you configure environment variable pods, how do you expose certain deployments using services, and how do you make sure that the pods are talking to each other, or even how do you restrict them using network policies. So those are the kind of the questions you're gonna get. So you're not gonna get some sort of a straightforward questions in your exam, like create a service for me, and then somebody's gonna reward you points for that. And yeah, that's it with that. Again, this is with the video. Thanks for watching. If you find it informative or useful, please like the video, subscribe the channel, leave a comment below, and good luck with your exam.